The mop bucket wheels squeaked as Captain Elena Ghost Rodriguez pushed it down the sterile hallway of Holloman Air Force Base. At 0500 hours, the administrative building was empty, except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant rumble of early morning flight operations. She dipped the mop in soapy water, wringing it with practiced efficiency, while her mind calculated wind speeds and flight vectors. For 18 months, Elena had been invisible, not by choice, but by design. The Pentagon's Inspector General had placed her undercover to investigate reports of systemic discrimination and corruption at Holloman. Her cover was perfect. Elena Vasquez, civilian contractor, custodial services, a woman with broken English and a quiet demeanor, who cleaned offices and emptied trash cans, while colonels and captains discussed classified operations around her, as if she didn't exist. What they didn't know was that Elena Vasquez held a master's degree in aerospace engineering, spoke 4 languages fluently, and had logged over 2,000 hours in F-16, fighting Falcons. She was one of the Air Force's most decorated female pilots, temporarily sacrificing her wings to root out the cancer that was destroying morale and careers at this base. The morning routine was always the same. Start with the common areas, work through the administrative offices, save Colonel Marcus Brennan's office for last. Brennan, the base commander, treated her with casual contempt that bordered on cruelty. He was also the primary target of her investigation. As she mopped the pilot briefing room, Elena's trained eye automatically assessed the mission planning materials left on the tables. Poorly planned flight paths, inadequate weather analysis, insufficient backup protocols. She'd seen 3 near misses in the past month that could have been prevented with proper planning. But Elena Vasquez, the cleaning lady, couldn't point out tactical errors to fighter pilots. "Hey, you." Elena looked up to see Lieutenant Jake Morrison approaching, his flight suit crisp and his attitude immediately apparent. Morrison was 26, fresh from pilot training, and carried himself with the arrogance that came from never being told no. "This floor's still wet," he said, tracking mud across her freshly mopped surface. "Do it again." Elena nodded quietly, watching Morrison laugh with his wingman about the stupid cleaning lady, who didn't even speak proper English. If he only knew that she'd been flying fighter jets when he was still in high school. The day progressed, with familiar indignities. Major Sarah Chen, the operations officer, spoke about her as if she weren't present. "Can someone get the cleaner out of here? We're discussing classified material." Captain Rodriguez bit her tongue and gathered her supplies. In her real life, she outranked Chen and had clearance levels that would make the major's head spin. But Elena Vasquez just nodded and shuffled out, invisible once again. The breaking point came at 1,500 hours in Colonel Brennan's office. Elena was emptying his wastebasket when she overheard a phone conversation that made her blood boil. Brennan was talking to someone at headquarters, his voice loud and dismissive. "No, I don't think we need any more female pilots at this base," he said, feet propped on his desk. "They're a distraction, and frankly, most of them can't handle the pressure. I've been blocking those transfer requests for months." Elena's hands tightened on the trash bag. She'd suspected this, but hearing it confirmed was different. Brennan was actively sabotaging women's careers, preventing qualified female pilots from receiving assignments to his base. "The cleaning lady? She's right here, but she barely speaks English. These people are good for manual labor, nothing more." That was the moment Elena Rodriguez stopped being invisible by choice and started planning her revelation. "Who cares what I think?" Brennan continued. "I'm just saying we need to maintain standards. This isn't about discrimination. It's about capability." Elena finished emptying the trash and left the office, her mind racing. She had enough evidence now. Recorded conversations, documented incidents, a pattern of behavior that violated every principle the Air Force claimed to uphold. But she needed one more piece, proof that Brennan's attitudes were affecting operational safety. The opportunity came 3 days later. Elena was cleaning the weather briefing room when she overheard the meteorology team discussing the next day's training mission. Severe weather was moving in from the west, with dangerous wind shear and low visibility conditions, the kind of weather that required experienced pilots and careful planning. But when she looked at the mission roster, Elena's blood ran cold. Morrison and 3 other junior pilots were scheduled for a complex formation training flight in conditions that were borderline dangerous for veteran pilots, let alone rookies. The flight plan showed they'd be flying through the worst of the storm system. Elena tried to approach Sergeant Williams, the scheduling NCO, speaking in her carefully practiced broken English. "Excuse me, sir. Tomorrow weather, very bad. Maybe dangerous for young pilots?" Williams barely looked up from his computer. Nobody asked you, lady. Stick to cleaning toilets. That night, Elena sat in her modest apartment off base and made the call she'd been preparing for 18 months. The encrypted phone buzzed twice before a familiar voice answered. General Martinez speaking. Sir, this is Captain Rodriguez. Operation Ghost Wing. Elena, what's your status? Mission complete, sir. I have documented evidence of systematic discrimination, operational safety violations, and command negligence, but I need to break cover immediately. They've scheduled junior pilots for a training mission in dangerous weather conditions. There was a pause. Are you certain about the weather assessment? Elena looked at the meteorological data she'd obtained through channels that Elena Vasquez shouldn't have had access to. Sir, I've flown in these conditions. Morrison and his team aren't experienced enough. They're going to get themselves killed. Understood. You're authorized to break cover at your discretion. We'll have investigators on scene within 6 hours. Elena hung up and stared at her closet. In the back, behind the humble clothes of a cleaning woman, hung a flight suit she hadn't worn in over a year. Tomorrow, Captain Elena Rodriguez would fly again. The next morning dawned gray and turbulent. Elena arrived at the base at her usual time, but instead of reporting to the custodial supply room, she walked directly to the Squadron Operations Center. Several pilots were gathered around the weather briefing, arguing about whether to postpone the training mission. Wind shear's looking pretty nasty, one of them said, studying the radar displays. Morrison dismissed the concern with typical arrogance. We've trained for this. Besides, Brennan wants us to maintain the flight schedule. Showing weakness isn't going to get us noticed by the right people. Elena watched from the doorway, still in her civilian clothes, still invisible. That was about to change. Excuse me, she said, dropping the accent she'd maintained for 18 months. You need to scrub that mission. The weather conditions exceed safe parameters for your experience level. The room fell silent. Morrison turned, his face already twisting into a sneer. Did the cleaning lady just try to give us tactical advice? Actually, Elena said calmly, Captain Rodriguez is giving you tactical advice. She pulled out her military ID and placed it on the briefing table. Captain Elena Rodriguez, 388th Fighter Wing. Call sign Ghost. And you're about to make the biggest mistake of your very short career. Morrison's face went white as he read the ID. Around the room, pilots who had ignored her for months suddenly realized who had been emptying their trash cans and mopping their floors. Major Chen stepped forward, her voice uncertain. This has to be some kind of mistake. Elena smiled coldly. The only mistake was thinking you could treat people like dirt just because you assumed they were beneath you. She turned to Morrison. Tell me, Lieutenant, how many combat hours do you have? 37 simulator hours, and I have over 2,000 hours in the F-16, including 400 combat hours over Iraq and Afghanistan. I've flown in weather conditions that would ground your entire squadron, and I'm telling you, that mission is a death trap. The room erupted in confused voices, but Elena wasn't finished. She walked to the mission planning computer and pulled up the weather data, her fingers flying over the keys with the expertise of someone who had done this 1,000 times. Look at this wind shear data. Gusts up to 60 knots at 15,000 feet, with severe turbulence and visibility less than 2 miles. You put inexperienced pilots in that soup, and you'll be calling search and rescue by noon. Major Chen found her voice. If you're really a captain, where have you been for the past year and a half? Elena looked directly at her. Watching you. All of you. Documenting every instance of discrimination, every safety violation, every time you treated someone as less than human because they didn't fit your idea of who deserved respect. The implications began to sink in around the room. Elena continued, I've recorded conversations, documented incidents, witnessed behavior that would make your commanding officers sick to their stomachs. Did you really think the Pentagon wouldn't notice the pattern of female pilots being denied assignments here? The unusually high accident rate? The morale problems? Before anyone could respond, the operations center door burst open. Colonel Brennan strode in, his face red with authority and anger. What the hell is going on here? Why is the civilian contractor in my briefing room? Elena turned to face him, no longer hiding behind the persona of Elena Vasquez. Because Captain Elena Rodriguez has a few questions for you, sir. Brennan's expression went through a series of changes as he processed what he was seeing. The quiet, subservient cleaning woman was gone, replaced by a military officer who carried herself with unmistakable authority. This is impossible, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Elena reached into her pocket and withdrew a small recording device. Would you like to hear your conversation from Tuesday? The one where you explained to headquarters why female pilots aren't suitable for your base? The color drained from Brennan's face. Around the room, pilots and officers who had participated in 18 months of casual cruelty began to understand the magnitude of their situation. That's classified information, Brennan began. Which I have clearance to access, Elena interrupted. My real clearance level, not the one assigned to Elena Vasquez. She paused, letting that sink in. Tell me, Colonel, do you remember the conversation where you called me good for manual labor, nothing more? The silence in the room was deafening. Elena looked around at the faces that had ignored her, dismissed her, treated her as invisible for so long. Here's what's going to happen, she continued. That training mission is scrubbed immediately. Weather conditions are unsafe for pilots of their experience level. Second, investigators from the Inspector General's office are already en route. Third, every single one of you is going to explain to them why you thought it was acceptable to create a hostile work environment. Morrison, who had been growing paler by the minute, finally found his voice. We didn't know. Exactly. Elena cut him off. You didn't know because you never bothered to look past your assumptions. You saw a woman in custodial clothes and decided she wasn't worth your basic human decency. Major Chen stepped forward, her expression a mixture of shame and confusion. Captain, I need to understand. If I'm really what? A pilot? An officer? Someone who deserves respect? Elena's voice carried years of suppressed anger. Major Chen, I've been listening to classified briefings for 18 months, while you discussed throwing me out of rooms for security reasons. I've been watching you plan missions with safety protocols I helped write at my previous assignment. I've been emptying your trash while you complained about the decline of military standards. She walked to the scheduling board and began making changes with swift efficiency. Morrison, Davis, and Patterson are hereby grounded pending evaluation. The training mission is postponed until weather conditions improve and proper risk assessments are completed. Brennan found his voice. You can't just... I can, and I am. Elena turned to face him directly. Sir, my real assignment here was to investigate reports of systematic discrimination and safety violations. Mission accomplished. The evidence I've collected over the past 18 months will be presented to a review board next week. The room fell silent again, as the full implications became clear. Careers were about to be destroyed, not by enemy action or aircraft malfunctions, but by the simple act of treating another human being with contempt. Elena walked to the operations desk and picked up the secure phone. This is Captain Rodriguez, authentication code Ghost 77 Alpha. I need to speak with Wing Commander immediately. As she waited for the connection, she looked around the room one final time, at the faces of people who had worked alongside her for over a year, without seeing her. You know what the real tragedy is? She said quietly. I actually liked this assignment. Flying is what I live for, but there's something satisfying about the simple, honest work of keeping a place clean and organized. But you couldn't let me have even that dignity. The phone connection went through, and Elena's voice became crisp and professional. Sir, Captain Rodriguez reporting. Operation Ghostwing is complete. Request permission to resume normal duties and prepare for Inspector General review. She listened for a moment, then continued. Yes, sir. Evidence is comprehensive. Recommend immediate operational safety review and command evaluation. After hanging up, Elena addressed the room one final time. Gentlemen, ladies, you're about to learn a valuable lesson about assumptions. The person you least expect might be the person most qualified to help you. The individual you dismiss as unimportant might be the one watching everything you do. She walked toward the door, then paused. Oh, and Lieutenant Morrison? That combat formation you've been practicing? You're executing the turns at too steep an angle for the aircraft's weight distribution. I noticed it 3 weeks ago while cleaning the simulator room, but Elena Vasquez wasn't qualified to offer tactical advice. With that, she left the stunned operations center and walked across the base toward the flight line. Her real flight line, where her F-16 waited in a hangar she'd visited dozens of times as a cleaning woman, but never as a pilot. 2 hours later, Captain Elena Rodriguez sat in the cockpit of an F-16C Fighting Falcon, running through pre-flight checks with the muscle memory of someone born to fly. Her hands moved over the controls with practiced efficiency, each switch and gauge as familiar as her own heartbeat. The investigation that followed would uncover systemic problems that reached far beyond one base. Colonel Brennan would face court-martial proceedings. Morrison and several others would receive formal reprimands, and new protocols would be implemented, Air Force-wide, to prevent similar situations. But for Elena, the real victory was simpler. She was flying again. As her F-16 lifted off the runway, climbing into the clear sky above New Mexico, she thought about the lessons of the past 18 months. About the power of assumptions, the importance of treating every person with dignity, and the dangerous blindness that comes from believing your rank or position makes you superior to others. The radio crackled with air traffic control instructions, and Elena responded with the call sign she'd earned through skill and dedication, rather than assuming she deserved it. Ghost 1, Roger. Proceeding to assigned altitude. Below her, Holloman Air Force Base grew smaller, but the lessons learned there would influence policy and attitudes for years to come. Sometimes the most important missions are the ones conducted in silence, and sometimes the greatest victories come not from destroying enemies, but from revealing the truth about ourselves. Captain Elena Rodriguez had spent 18 months invisible, but she'd never been more clearly seen than when she finally chose to reveal who she really was. And in that revelation, she'd reminded everyone around her that respect isn't about rank or appearance, it's about recognizing the fundamental dignity that every person deserves. The sky opened before her, vast and welcoming, exactly where she belonged.